Morning all, Brian S. Pratt here. I'm going to read chapter 9 of Jaikus and Reneeke Join the Guild. So Jaikus and Reneeke are in the area below Sarthel. Or maybe they're not below Sarthel because they use a teleporter to get where they are now, so they're not exactly sure where they're at. But they're exploring it. And they found a secret door that's lowering, and now they're going to go in there and see what is on the other side. They only got one day to do it, so they got to do what they can while they can and get as much treasure to take home. And hopefully, all of Jaikus's missteps and poor judgment won't cause him to lose out on joining the guild. So here it is, chapter 9. They had just found the pressure plates to open the door, and the wall is sliding down. Lucky guess. Seward's voice could not negate the feeling of relief and satisfaction Jaikus felt at seeing the wall slide open. Way to go, Jake! Reneeke's shout of congratulations, on the other hand, did much to bolster those feelings. Yes, well done indeed. Charka came up behind and slapped him on the back. Gazing into the opening, he asked, "Now, what do we have here?" The opening of the door revealed a passage equally as large and well-formed as the one in which they now stood. A pair of torch sconces sat as silent sentinels several feet from the opening, one to either side. Both were empty. "Looks like a passageway," Jaikus replied. Charka nodded. "Let's see where it goes." He then gave Jaikus a slight nudge to get him moving. Relief and satisfaction quickly gave way to nervousness and fear as he once again proceeded into the unknown. Shining the light before him, he moved to and then through the newly formed opening. After his last experience, he gave the floor a much greater scrutiny. Though how to tell if there were more loose pressure plates similar to those previously encountered was something about which he hadn't the faintest clue. Upon reaching the pair of sconces, the light from the lantern revealed another pair farther down. He was beginning to wonder if similar pairs would be encountered at regular intervals when the floor dropped out from beneath him. A cry of fear escaped him as he started to plummet. Arms and legs flailed in an attempt to find any means by which to halt his fall. The rope secured about his middle snapped taut. The abrupt halt caused him to slam into the side of the shaft. Then he heard from above, "Look out, Jake!" Comma. All right, 1 second. There we go. Horror filled him as he glanced up toward the call. Small sections of the walls to which the torch sconces were attached were rotating outward and down. He had but a moment to ponder this new development before, from out of one sconce, a liquid gushed forth. Twisting and pushing himself along the side of the shaft, Jaikus fought to avoid coming into contact with the liquid. Was it acid? Poison? An image flashed into his mind of the equipment in Keeler's back room, the ones the smith had claimed an acid trap had destroyed. Despite his best efforts, some of the liquid hit him as it passed. An involuntary cry and much contorted thrashing later, he realized it was not acid at all, but oil, possibly lamp oil. "Catch it!" he heard Charka yell. Something else fell from above. Its basic shape was spherical, but misshapen. He tried to do as instructed and catch it, but the object slipped through his grip and vanished into the darkness below. 2 seconds later, he heard the object strike the bottom. There was a flash, then fire sprang to life 40 feet below. As the smoke began to rise, he felt the tug on the rope. The others drew him from the shaft like a bucket from a well. When he reached the top, Reneeke was there to grab him by the hand and pull him the rest of the way out. "Are you okay?" his friend asked, concern evident in his voice. Smoke issuing from out of the shaft caused him to cough, but he nodded. "Yeah, Rene, I'm fine. Now I understand the need for the rope." Reneeke grinned. If Jaikus was able to quip a response like that, he would be fine. Jaikus glanced back to where a good section of the passageway had fallen away. "Another trap?" "Looks that way," affirmed Charka. "You must have tripped it when you passed through." Reneeke shook his head. "I don't think so." "You don't?" asked Charka. "No, sir." Getting back to the hole Gesturing back to the whole bellowing smoke, he said, "It doesn't feel right. I think that Jaikus tripped the trap when he pressed the stones to access the secret area. They opened the way, true, but they also triggered this trap to catch the intruder after he passed through. By lulling us into believing any wards had been circumvented, we stumbled into the trap quite readily. Without the rope, Jaikus would be dead." "True enough," Jaikus agreed. "I don't know about that," Jaikus argued, then shrugged. "Anything's possible." Actually, that's just the way it was. As you recall from the last chapter, there were 3 pressure plates. Jaikus stepped on them, they went down an inch, right? If you do them in the correct order, the trap won't activate. But if you do them out of the correct order, the secret door will still open, but the trap will activate. That way, it seems like you've got ahead, and anyone beyond that checking for traps won't find any because the trigger mechanism was back on those 3 steps. Then when the floor opened, you got the 2 torch conches on either wall. They kind of went out, and then they rotated down, right? Now one of them had oil, so if the oil came out, the other one had the pyrostone, which we'll hear about in a second, which fell after the oil, and when it hits the pyrostone upon contact, ignites. That's why it's called a pyrostone. One of my more deadly traps I had back in my dungeon days, my dungeon master days. "It was a nasty one, too," Seward added appreciatively. "Not only was it designed to drop the intruder down a pit, but it poured oil and then dropped a pyrostone to finish the job." "Is that what that was?" Jaikus questioned. "A pyrostone?" He recalled someone shouting for him to catch the falling object, which he had failed to do. Charkin nodded. "That it was. Strike a pyrostone strong or hard enough, and it will ignite." "So that was how the oil caught fire?" "Exactly. When the pyrostone hit the bottom, it did so with enough force to cause it to ignite, and the oil went up in flames." Okay, here's a thought just occurred to me, and they always happen. Okay, if you strike a pyrostone to ignite it, right? How do you create a small pyrostone, right? Because wouldn't the assumption be that the pyrostone would be part of a larger thing? And if you're mining it, or say you got this great big pyrostone, right, this humongous thing, but you just want small ones, how are you gonna strike it to break it off? I guess you have to strike it very slowly and very carefully, not hard enough to ignite it, but just hard enough to separate it. That's a thought. Sharkin nodded. That it was. Strike a pyrostone hard enough, and it will ignite. So that was how the oil caught fire? Exactly. When the pyrostone hit the bottom, it did so with enough force to cause it to ignite, and the oil went up in flames. Jaikus swallowed hard. If it hadn't been for the rope, you would have been roasted alive. Provided, of course, that the fall hadn't killed you first. "Wicked," Reneeke exclaimed. "Oh, that reminds me. Bella said he would take any pyrostones you find. Claimed to have a buyer wanting some." Charka grins. "I'm sure he would. They are in high demand by the magic users. Am I not right, Kate?" "You are. The tower always pays well for such." "Maybe there are more where that one came from," Reneeke suggested. Glancing toward where the section of the wall had settled before dropping their lethal cargo. Sections of the wall, because both sides moved. Hang on a second. Sometimes my S sticks, so I copied an S and pasted it. It works. Wonky, but it works. Seward shook his head. "You would have to find the trap's back side. The stones are worth some gold, to be sure, but not enough to warrant us wasting our time trying to get to them." "Indeed," Charka agreed. Coming to Jaikus, the troop leader asked, "Are you able to continue?" Jaikus nodded. "I think so, just a little shaky." "I'll continue as Springer for the next bit," Reneeke offered. "Very well, that may be for the best." "Thank you," Jaikus said as he untied the rope from around his middle and handed it to his friend. "Not a problem," he replied. "We're in this together." Once the rope was securely in place, Reneeke moved to the edge of the shaft. He could readily leap the 4-foot gap to the other side. But before he did, he couldn't help but look down at what was left of the fire burning far below. Gauging the distance to the bottom at around 60 feet, he was glad that Charka had insisted they use the rope. Without it, Jaikus wouldn't have fared nearly so well. About to leap across, he paused when a thought occurred to him. Glancing over his shoulder toward Charka, he said, "I wonder if there's anything at the bottom of this pit." The steward laughed. "They wouldn't stash their treasure in such a place." "That's not what I was thinking," he explained. "Perhaps Jaikus wasn't the first to run afoul of this trap. Could it be possible that someone else happened this way in the past? What's left of them could be lying down below." "They'd be nothing but dust by now," replied Charka. "It would have to be centuries since the last person wandered these passages." "I wasn't thinking about their body, but what they may have had on them, treasures and whatnot." A calculating look appeared in Charka's eyes. "Can you see anything down there?" Reneeke glanced back down the shaft. "I can see shadows in the firelight, but nothing definite." Grabbing hold of the rope already tied to him, he shook it, then asked, "Want me to take a look?" Charka nodded as he gripped the rope. "Might be worth the time. Go ahead." Seward joined him on holding the rope as Reneeke moved into position. With one hand on the rope and the other gripping the lantern, Reneeke scooted over the edge. As his weight came full upon the rope, he glanced to the two holding him secure and nodded. Down to the shaft he went. Charka and Seward let out the rope slowly, keeping his descent steady and manageable. Jaikus stood at the lip with Lady Kate to observe his progress. Smoke continued rising from the shaft, though it was beginning to taper off now that most of the oil had been consumed. In the light of the dying fires, Jaikus and Lady Kate could see that the bottom of the shaft was littered with debris. "Your friend has a good head for this business." Jaikus nodded. "Reneeke has always been smart, or perhaps creative would be a better way to describe him. You can always count on him to approach a problem in a way unexpected, often advantageously." Below, Reneeke had reached the halfway point. "He's halfway there," she told the two playing out the rope. "How is the rope holding out?" "I think we may have enough," Charka replied. Panning out more, he and Seward kept lowering the young Springer closer to the bottom. In the shaft, Reneeke was close enough now to direct the lantern's light downward to reveal what treasure might await at the shaft's bottom. The smoke had continued dissipating until now it was barely a hindrance. 3 sets of bones laid in various stages of repose across the bottom. 2 were human, 1 was not. Of the humans, 1 had a cracked skull, while the other looked to have broken his leg upon impact. He wasn't sure what the non-human one may have been, but there was a sword lying across its midsection, indicating the creature had been sentient. Reneeke was fairly certain the sword did not belong to the 2 human skeletons, as they each had swords of their own. His feet alighted upon the stone bottom, and the rope grew slack. "I'm here," he hollered. "Anything?" came Charka's question. "Yes. Give me a moment, and I'll give you a full inventory." He looked at the glitter of coins and jewels that lay scattered about, as well as several other items that he wasn't sure what they were. "Toss down my pack." A moment later, he saw the brown leather pack free-falling toward him. Once he had it, he began scooping up valuables. The human skeletons. All right, I've got the apostrophe in the wrong spot there because there's 2 human skeletons, so the apostrophe has to be on the right side of the S. The human skeletons' swords were in bad repair. As pitted and rusted as they were, Reneeke thought that even Keeler would refuse them. He stepped on the blade of one and felt it crumble beneath his foot. How long would it take for a blade to be reduced to such a state? Centuries? Longer? He may never know. On the other hand, the blade of the non-human was still in good shape. It looked rather plain with a simple unadorned crossguard. There was no filigree or anything else that might indicate it to be more than a simple blade. Taking the sword, he noticed that it felt lighter and better balanced than the one he carried. Running his finger down the business end, he discovered that it still held an edge. Reneeke removed his blade from the scabbard and slid the new one in. The fit was a bit loose, as this new blade was slightly narrower, but it would work. Since his old sword wasn't worth much, he left it lying on the floor of the shaft. He felt certain Charka would not begrudge him this new blade. The glitter of gold drew his attention to the skeletal hand of one of the humans. 2 rings rested upon the bony appendages. One was a plain golden band, and the other was silver, bearing a ruby set in white gold. He knew Charka would like the second one. He removed both. Once he had gleaned everything of value from among the misfortunate trio that had long ago succumbed to the trap far above, he hollered that he was ready to be pulled up. Excellent job, Charka prayed when Reneeke emptied the contents of the pack onto the passageway floor. And as he had thought, Charka zeroed in on the ring with the ruby. Yes, excellent indeed. Lady Kate, on the other hand, was more interested in the objects gathered along with the coins and jewels. There were 4. A 6-inch branch that looked like it had been taken from a willow tree, a crystal orb whose center was the color of aquamarine, and a pair of black onyx-like spheres that had irises etched into their surfaces. What her supposition may have been as to the properties, or lack thereof, of the items was forestalled by Charka's comment that it was time they continued on. We can give this all a more thorough examination upon our return to the camp. Nodding, Lady Kate put her items into her pack, while Charka and Seward divvied the rest between theirs. Doesn't Reneeke get something? Jaikus queried. He knew better than to ask for himself. Your shares will be given upon our return to Rekla. Jaikus was less than thrilled, but Reneeke took it in stride. Actually, you don't give springers treasure because you might lose them. You know, they might fall out of a pit and they can't be recovered, or they might get doused in acid, which could ruin treasure. Springers really shouldn't carry treasure. That's really why they're not giving them anything to carry. Even though the new guy usually carries, is the workhorse / mule of the group. In this case, they're not because, they're out there and stuff can get ruined. Pulling his newfound sword from the scabbard, Reneeke said, I also found this. Reneeke held it out for Charka's inspection. It was better than my previous one, so I took it. Charka nodded to Lady Kate, who took possession of the sword. After the metal globe blew for a brief time, she said, There is a definite aura to it. Magical? Jaikus asked. To some degree, yes. She handed it back to Reneeke. I detect nothing malignant. Reneeke glanced at Charka before taking the sword back. Keep it, the troop leader said. For without your insightful proposal of investigating the shaft, it would have remained there along with these other treasures. Consider it a bonus. It will not be accounted against your share of the profits. Thank you. Taking back the sword, he flashed Jaikus a grin before resheathing it. His friend was green with envy. Magic sword, sweet, huh? Charka shrugged. Can you tell what the aura does? Jaikus asked Lady Kate. Not without expending much more time and effort. If he wishes to know more, he will have to do that on his own. Olaf's would have scrolls to do the trick, though they are a bit pricey. It might be wiser to invest your take from this venture in armor and other items, or maybe even training at the guild should you become a member. Other items? You mean like healing scrolls? She nodded. Exactly. Olaf has something he calls the basic pack. It's a dozen scrolls for less than it would cost to buy singly. Thank you. We'll keep that in mind. Over by the shaft, Reneeke leapt across the opening to land safely on the far side. Moving down only a short distance, he waited for the others to cross before continuing. Once Charka and Seward made the crossing, he directed the lantern's light to shine down the passageway, then proceeded into the unknown. The passageway continued straight for 50 feet before it was clear they approached another room. Slowing his pace, Reneeke scanned the floor ahead for irregularities as he went. He reached the room without incident. Got a room up here, he hollered over his shoulder. Anything in it? Hurrying forward, Charka came to stand behind his springer. Starting on the right, Reneeke panned the light slowly across the room. Midway through, he paused when a square, iron-bound wooden box entered the field of light. Its sides were composed of wood, though the wood was in an advanced state of decay. The box's left side sagged noticeably. Well, 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 what do we have here? A chest, maybe? Reneeke queried. Definitely. He then had Reneeke finish paying the light through the rest of the room, whose effort revealed another doorway in the wall to their left. The sagging, iron-bound box was the sole occupant of the room. Bringing the light back to settle upon the chest, Reneeke asked, "Want me to check it out?" "If you wouldn't mind." Reneeke directed the light toward the floor before him, gave it a once-over, then carefully began making his way across to the chest. "It will be your turn when we continue," Charker told his other springer. Jaikus merely nodded as he watched his friend's progress. "It's a trap." That thought was very much on Reneeke's mind. He may not have been a thief, but something like this chest, left all by itself out in the open, said something was not quite right. Logically, he couldn't fathom why it would be left in such a place, or such an Logically, he couldn't fathom why it would be left in such an exposed way, except perhaps to tempt the unwary into doing something fatal, like what he was doing right now. As his proximity to the chest narrowed, so too did his pace slow. He rotated the iris of the bull's eye lantern in order to focus a more direct beam of light upon the chest. There were definite cracks in the wood, some large enough to expose that which was contained within. The lantern's light was being reflected off of something metallic and bright from the inside. From inside. Not the inside, but from inside. Yeah. The lantern's light was being reflected off of something metallic and bright from inside. No, from within. Ooh, that's even better. If I can get W to work. I might need a new laptop. Hang on one second. All right. The lantern's light was being reflected off of something metallic and bright from within. That's much better. The lock was an internal one with a keyhole waiting invitingly. He had no great desire to try and open the chest. To do so would most likely be extreme folly. Reneeke pictured himself being sprayed with acid or perhaps struck by a dart covered in the most deadly of poisons. Along with a dozen other situations bards had peppered their stories with. Each tale contained a more gruesome outcome than the one before. He hadn't realized he had remained motionless for an extended time until Seward hollered, "Are you going to open it or not?" "Yeah," he hollered back. Gazing at the keyhole, he added silently, "But not that way." Taking in the advanced decay of rot undermining the integrity of the chest, an idea came to mind. Moving around to the side of the chest, he kicked the rotten wood with as much strength as he could muster. Splintering under the blow, the wood of the chest collapsed, but not entirely, as the iron bands held bits and pieces of it together. He could now clearly see items of gold and silver forming a small pile within. Another kick completely obliterated what remained of the wooden chest. Simultaneously, a liquid spray exploded outward from the chest front to coat a sizable area of the floor. Reneeke began sifting through the remains of the chest as the others entered the room and approached. He glanced to Charka, grinned, and asked, "Did I do that right?" Laughing, Charka nodded. "Boy, you did that perfectly. We'll make an adventure out of you yet." There were 5 more of the golden discs, 6 gems of varying sizes and colors. What once had been a book, but all that remained, not was left. Was left, but I think remained sounds a little better. Yeah. What once had been a book. What had been a book, but all that. Yeah. Okay. There were 5 more of the golden discs, 6 gems of varying sizes and colors. What once had been a book, but all that remained was a hard leather binding that had bound the pages together, and a dagger that had long succumbed to the ravages of time and rust. Charka divided the booty between himself, Seward, and Lady Kate. Jaikus couldn't help but look longingly at the treasure. His earlier misjudgment would probably keep him from ever sharing. He knew that at least Reneeke would receive a part, and that his friend would share with him afterward. Coming to Reneeke's side, he started untying the rope from around his friend. "My turn." "You know, Jake, this is easier than they led us to believe. So far, I would have to agree with you, but we aren't out of it yet." He glanced at the dark doorway he would be leading the others through. The worst could be yet to come. If we keep our wits and do nothing stupid, I believe we will survive this. Renee, I sure hope so. Securing the rope around his middle, he then waited for the signal from Charka for him to get going. When it came, Reneeke moved to the rear with Lady Kate, and Jaikus headed for the doorway. Another passageway made a quick left turn not far from the room, then continued unabated for only a short distance, becoming to where it widened to twice its former size. 3 pedestals sat centered in the passageway, 3 feet apart. Made from gray marble, they were but 2 feet in height. Atop each sat a small statuette. The one atop the first pedestal was of a miniature naked man, its face similar to that of the faces carved on the walls. The second statuette was of a little tree, possibly oak. On the last pedestal rested a simple 3-inch silver cylinder. Dark runes were inscribed upon its surface. Jaikus came to a stop a good 6 feet before the first pedestal. What do you make of this? The others came up behind him and looked at the naked man, the tree, and the cylinder. Decorations, perhaps? Reneeke suggested. Charka didn't immediately answer. It's possible. Kate? There is definitely magic at work here, she replied after a moment of spellcasting. I don't suppose it's the good, helpful kind of magic, Jaikus asked. No, it isn't. Turning her attention upon the young Springer, she said, to put it bluntly, it's more the you come close and I'll fry you kind. Wonderful, Jaikus groaned. Shining the light so it illuminated the passageway beyond the 3 statue-bearing pedestals, he saw where the walls again narrowed, bringing the passageway back to its original width. Charka kept silent as he contemplated what they should do. The words of Lady Kate weighed heavily upon him. He desperately desired to find out what lay at the end of this passageway, but he didn't want to needlessly throw away the lives of his Springers. True, that's what they were there for, but he had just enough of a conscience not to do so simply because he could. Turning to Lady Kate, he asked, Is it passive? The magic? She asked. When he nodded, she said, I can't be sure. What I can be certain of that is strong, and that it permeates the area in and around the 3 pedestals. It may react if we try to pass, or it may react only if we move the statuettes, or it may not react at all, but I get the feeling that should the magic react, it will be bad, very bad. Face turning grim, he struggled with vying emotions, greed and caution. In the end, greed won out. He glanced at Lady Kate, and she could see the decision in his eyes. You can't. It's what we are here for, he replied. Turning to Jaikus, he indicated for the Springer to continue down the passageway. Jaikus looked at him with undisguised horror. You can't be serious. After what you just said? Merely pass through. Charka said, touch nothing. But nothing. Fulfill your contract or leave. He met Jaikus' gaze with one of grim determination. A quick glance to Reneeke showed him to be just as fearful as was Jaikus. Good luck, he said. Thanks. Mouth dry from nervousness and fear, Jaikus almost hadn't been able to get that single word out. Turning toward the pedestals, he could feel his legs begin to trembling. It's more the you come close and I'll fry you kind. Lady Kate's words kept running through his mind. Doing his best to banish them to the nethermost recesses, he took a step forward. Hug the wall, she advised. Keep as far from them as you can. I'll do that, he stammered, without bothering to glance back. He took another step forward, moving closer to the wall at the same time. Eyes glued to the statue of the naked man, he cautiously took a third. Was it his imagination, or were the naked man's eyes tracking his movements? His 4th step brought him within arm's reach of the pedestal. The overactiveness of his imagination was dispelled when he moved out of the naked man's line of sight. Having made it this far with no ill effects, he took 2 more quick steps and paused. Glancing back to where the others waited, he saw Charka, Seward, and Reneeke all maintaining a grip on the rope. Just behind them stood Lady Kate. In her right hand, she held a black, rune-inscribed wand. You're doing great, Reneeke said encouragingly. Moving once again, he quickly came abreast of the tree statuette. Back when he stood with the others, it had looked like a regular, normal tree. But now that he was closer, could see that the leaves of the tree were in an advanced state of wilting. slightly curled in on themselves. Each leaf looked like a hand frozen in the act of curling in on itself to form a fist. The entire aspect of the diminutive tree disturbed him far more than had the naked little man. Several rapid steps took him past the tree and brought him near the final pedestal atop which rested the silver cylinder. Passing his eyes over the dark runes marring its surface made his skin crawl. Of the three, the cylinder unnerved him the most. Why it should be so, he couldn't even hazard a guess. Moving past, he was just glad the three pedestals and their objects were finally behind him, and that he remained alive and unaltered. I made it, he cried. Back at the other end, Charka had Seward follow, with Reneeke waiting until Seward traversed the pedestaled area and joined Jaikus before continue. Had go next. Yeah. Oh. Hang on one second. There we go. Yeah. One second. My X key wasn't working either. It's funny. It's like the line on my computer, 2, W, S, and X. Those four in that line are the ones I have trouble with. The more I play, the more my computer, the more I type, eventually they start working again. And then if I stop doing it, then they stop working. But if I do the keyboard or keep my laptop on, they work again. I don't understand it. Okay. Back at the other end, Charka had Seward go next, with Reneeke waiting until Seward traversed the pedestal area and joined Jaikus before following. While waiting for the others, Jaikus directed the lantern's light into the as yet unplumbed section of the passageway, curious to see what may lie ahead. He was surprised to discover that the light was being reflected, or rather refracted, by a glittering circle just beyond the lantern's reach. "Look at this," he said to Seward when the man reached his side. Interesting," was all the reply he received. The circle drew his gaze. Curiosity impelled him to take a step forward, but the rope drew taut, preventing him from proceeding. Seward jerked the rope another 2 times. Wait for the others. Charka was the last to pass through the pedestal area. When he arrived and saw the circle glittering farther down the passageway, he indicated for Jaikus to continue. His Springer nodded, took 2 steps forward, then collapsed. "Jake!" Reneeke shouted his friend's name as he raced forward to render what aid he could. Charka grabbed him by one of his pack straps and jerked him back. "Hold up there, lad." "But Jake needs me." Ignoring him, the troop leader signaled Lady Kate to cast a spell toward their unconscious Springer. "Dart," she announced. "Haul him back." Pulling the rope quickly, Charka, Seward, and Reneeke dragged Jaikus back to where they stood. Lady Kate had already drawn forth a small flask from her pack by then and knelt next to Jaikus' head. Seward knelt on the other side and held open the Springer's mouth while she poured a portion of the flask's content through the parted lips. She then stoppered the flask and set it aside. "Here's the culprit," Charka said as he drew forth a small dart from where it lay embedded within Jaikus' neck. "He must have triggered some sort of trap." To Seward he said, "See if you can find it." Seward nodded, then moved to carry out his leader's request. Reneeke knelt beside Lady Kate. "Will he die?" "Not if I can help it. I gave him a powerful antidote, which negates the effects of almost all poisons." He looked to her with great anxiety. What if the poison isn't one of the ones it negates? She turned a serious look upon him. "Let's just hope that is not the case." Returning her attention to the one lying before her, she moved his head to expose the area just below his left ear that had been struck, and gasped. It was swollen and angry red, with a single dark vein gradually making its way downward along his neck. They watched as it drew ever closer to where the neck merged with the upper body. "Give him the rest of it," Charka said. This time, Reneeke parted Jaikus' lips while Lady Kate emptied the flask into him. Again, they turned his head to the side. The line of red had stopped its downward progression. "It's working," Reneeke announced with relief. Lady Kate wasn't so assured of the potion's effectiveness, but kept her concerns to herself. "Come on, Jake." Then the line slowly began to fade, and the swelling subsided. In a matter of minutes, all redness was gone. When his eyes fluttered open, Lady Kate said, "Thank the gods." Feeling weak as a kitten, Jaikus glanced from face to face, uncertain as how he came to be lying on the passageway floor. "What happened?" "You were hit by a poisoned dart," Lady Kate explained. "Yeah, man, it was ugly, but she fixed you up with an antidote. Now you're right as rain." Reneeke couldn't help but smile. "We'll take a short break so you can recover your strength," said Charco. To Lady Kate, he added, "If he hasn't recovered in that time, give him a healing draught as well." She nodded, then had Reneeke help her in moving Jaikus against the wall where he could sit in greater comfort. Producing the less than appetizing trail rations, she handed them to the two springers, and they ate while Seward worked to discover the mechanism by which Jaikus had triggered the trap. And that's chapter 9. So I guess Seward, while not being a thief, has some thieving abilities that he's acquired over the course of his adventure. So he's the de facto thief of the group, while he's not a real as skilled as a regular thief would be. And this was a fun chapter. Got to really flex my creative muscle in it. So the passageway, it has pedestal, and they had to get through it. And they had the three. They had the naked man, they had the tree, and they had the little cylinder. Don't know what they do. I don't know if I've ever figured that out. Well, we'll see, because I'm sure they're gonna have to come back past it. Maybe I said that. Frankly, I can't remember what happens. I mean, I've got a remembrance of a few scenes throughout the rest of the book, but what exactly happens, like this scene here, I forgot about the three pedestals and those things, and Jaikus getting hit by the dart. So, I love this. I really enjoy this book. Well, it looks okay. Personal note. So anyone who's not interested in my personal life, go ahead and shut her down. Personal note: my girlfriend comes home tomorrow. Yep, she gets to go home finally. Yay! It's been over a month since her surgery, and it's been a really hard recovery, but she's getting better. Occupational therapy at the rehab and physical therapy has really gotten her going. And surprisingly, her neighbor, whom she's kind of friendly with, well, her neighbor has this guy come and mow her lawn. She's an elderly lady, older than my girlfriend, and my girlfriend has blink on her house. That when there's motions, it turns on the camera. Well, twice now, the neighbor lady has gotten her lawn guy to mow my girlfriend's lawn. Isn't that nice of her? Some neighbors are really worth having next to you. So I'm kind of excited she gets to come home. Today's her last day of PT, because they won't do it on the days that she comes home. Then her daughter's driving up, will pick her up and then take her home. And then get her settled over the course of several days, find out what she needs, get some routines set up. But I think occupational therapy or home health will be coming in, probably daily, to take care of some chores for her. And then she'll just keep getting on the mend. Her pain was at a 10. It's now 6.57. So it's getting better. And her mobility is getting better. She can do more things for herself. And yeah, I'm really quite happy for her. Now for me, I mentioned yesterday about how I was going to go and have pizza at this new place, Tyler's Pizza in Paris, Texas. Man, what a bomb that was. I did a TikTok about it. So I'm not going to go into it here. If you want to hear about it, go to my TikTok. I got everything there. Well, anyway, I was cutting. The main point is, I didn't like it. I was cutting it with the pizza with my knife and fork, and I saw that if I took my fork and my knife and I pulled, the dough stretched. And having been a Pizza Hut manager for many years, a dough that stretches isn't cooked properly. And that just turned me off of that place. I mean, undercooked dough. I am a perfectionist when it comes to pizza. I want my thing crispy. Like when we cook a Tombstone or Red Baron pizza, those are our two favorite pizzas, or frozen pizzas from Walmart. You cook it on the grill, or the rack. You don't put it on a pizza pan. That way it gets crispy. If we do Papa Murphy's, you cook it on the tray that's provided for 10 minutes. You slide it off the tray and put it straight, on the rack. And then the crust is so crunchy. You pick up a piece, it just like this. It doesn't do that. It does that. I hate pizza that does that. Yeah. I mean, you can't put a Papa Murphy's pizza directly on it because it's still doughy and it would never work. But you cook it for 10 minutes, it solidifies, and then you can slide it off. So that's it. I guess that's it for me. Everyone, like, comment, subscribe. Everything, all that stuff helps the algorithms to go out. Oh, one more neat thing. Over on, here on YouTube, if you look at the map, the video for the map of Adventurers Guild, you'll notice that I corresponded with a Ukraine self-published author. Isn't that cool? So someone from Ukraine saw that. It came up in his feed for whatever reason, and we spoke for a very short time, nothing major, but he said that he was a fellow self-published author from Ukraine. So I thought that was really cool. Anyway, y'all take care, and have a good day. Oh, I'm getting biscuits today. Later.